basically for diabetes, but we added hypertension because diabetes and hypertension, they are like twins. Exactly. So we did both. Yes.
Okay. And what was the numbers looking like?
Oh God, with the sugar, it wasn't that bad, but the hypertension is crazy.
Wow.
Like crazy, crazy.
Hypertension as a result of the sugar or diabetes, or hypertension as on its own?
Hypertension as it on its own, exactly.
Okay.
And most of them have the two. And the sad part that made, actually I cried, but that made me sad was like somebody will come and he will tell you, yes, I have diabetes, I have high blood pressure, but for the past 3 months, I've not been able to afford my medication. So for 3 months, I haven't taken my medication.
Wow.
Because I don't have money.
Okay, let's take a step back. You're a dietitian, you're a nurse. Maybe let me ask a nurse, what is diabetes? A very obvious question, what is diabetes?
Okay, so if we say diabetes, diabetes is a chronic condition where our body cannot process the food we eat, like the glucose. When we eat food or when we eat carbohydrate, which most of our food are carbohydrate anyway, it turns into sugar or glucose into our bloodstream. Then it stays there. Then our pancreas, that has cells in them, produces this hormone called insulin. So the insulin helps this sugar in the blood into our cells and turn them as energy so that you can talk, you can run, you can do whatever you want to do, right? So when this pancreas is not working well or is producing insulin all right, but your body is resisting it, the sugar stays in the blood. And when the sugar gets so high in the blood, it causes a lot of issues. So that's when you get diagnosed with diabetes. So that's the high blood sugar.
Okay. Teacher, what does this mean? This is all science.
Yeah.
When I've come to sit in front of you, how would you break this down?
Yeah, so let's look at what happens when the food is eaten.
Okay.
So right when you take the food, especially the carbohydrate food, it goes into the stomach and is broken down into what we call glucose, which is what we call the sugar. This sugar is not the usual white or brown sugar that we know.
What does it look like?
Yeah,
though?
so it's like energy that supplies the cells. Now, when it's broken down into the glucose or sugar, it is absorbed into the blood, and then the body will have to take it out into the cells by the help of insulin, just as she has said. Now, let's look at a passport analogy, okay? So the insulin serves as the solution of moving the sugar or glucose into the cells. For instance, if you are traveling to the US, you would need a passport.
Yes.
Without a passport, you cannot enter US.
Yes.
So that's the same analogy with diabetes. So the passport is the insulin. So without that passport, the sugar which is in the blood, which is supposed to move into the cells, are denied access because you don't have either enough insulin or you have the insulin, but the body is unable to use it. So there are two things that causes that. So either you don't have enough or the body cannot use the insulin. So for the one who has the insulin, it's like you have the passport, but it has expired. And so when you get to where you're supposed to go, you'll be denied access because your passport has expired. So those are the two main reasons why people tend to have high sugar.
Okay, yeah. Lydia, again, so this has happened. What will happen to my body? I'll fall down, I will die, my eyes will close, my stomach will ache. What exactly would happen by the time you're telling me that, listen, either your body is not getting the energy that it needs or it is too much for your body, if I get the simple meaning of what diabetes is? What would happen to me? My arm will get swollen, I'll die.
Yeah, there'll be signs and symptoms. Okay. And we haven't come to the type of diabetes yet, but with the type 2, the symptoms, they don't show. Some of them are asymptomatic, they don't show. So it's up to you as a person. If you have a family history or whatever, you have to be going for checkups.
Okay, then take a step back. It will mean we have types of it.
Exactly.
Which the popular type 1, type 2.
Type 2.
Walk us through it.
Type 1, type 2, pre-diabetes and gestational diabetes. So the type...
That's 4.
4, yes. Maybe more will come, green one. So with the type 1, it's not common. Like 5 to 10 people living with diabetes are type 1 diabetics.
Okay.
Yes, but with them, It's like an autoimmune condition. So your own body, right, has attacked your pancreas, the cells in the pancreas, and destroyed those cells that produces the insulin. So now, like, you are just there.
So it's no fault of yours?
No. So you are just there. Your pancreas is there, but it's not working. Right. So with that one, your symptoms come quickly. It's right on set. You see, like, you be urinating frequently, you be thirsty, you be drinking water, but still you feel thirsty. You pee a lot especially during the night. Your vision changes. It becomes blurry. You get tingling at your fingers and your feet. When you get infection, it doesn't go, especially the women, you get yeast infection, it takes forever.
Oh.
You can't let, like, you know, and you get tired because when your blood sugar is high, you get so tired.
Wow, so that's the type 1.
That's the type 1.
Which is not so common, you say?
That's not so common, and that's what I have. Because you depend solely on insulin. Like, insulin is your life. So with the type 2, mostly it's lifestyle. And about 90 to 95% of people living with diabetes have type 2.
Let's go back to the type 1.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you come to know that you had, and Maxwell, I'll come to you shortly. How did you know, I'll come to you more, especially when we're talking about the foods and all of that, which would feature in the type 2 more, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll stick with you. How did you know that you had diabetes, and how long ago did you know this?
Okay, so I went to America in '98, in June. And in August, I started, like, getting tired. I'm a very active person.
Yes,
I hate being bored. I'm always like, but I get so tired, like, you know, and at times I'll get cramps in my leg. Yes, my belly will be hurting, and at times I'll be shaking. As soon as I drink Coke or any sweet thing, then I feel better. So one time, right, I think I almost passed out, and I was with my roommate, and she's like, Lydia, we need to go to the emergency room. So they took me to the emergency room, and, you know, in America, they'll ask you if you have family history of every disease you can imagine. So I remember my mom had told me a long time ago when I was about to go to secondary school Form 1 in '86 that she's been diagnosed with diabetes, which I had no idea about that disease, and I didn't care, you know. So I told the doctor that. So they did a test called A1C. A1C test is like an average of your blood sugar levels over 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
And that's the test mainly they use to diagnose diabetes. So they did that, and mine was like 13.9 or 13.5, very high. Okay. So at that point, the doctor told me that I have diabetes, but wasn't sure whether type 1 or type 2. And guess what? The doctor told me, you look for a doctor for a follow-up care. MFA, I've been in America for 2 months. I'm there to work, take care of my family back home. Go look for who? A doctor? For follow? No. So I was in denial for over 10 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Even after that first?
Yes. I was in denial for over 10 years.
Wow.
So when I moved out of New York, I was diagnosed in New York. So when I moved out of New York to Massachusetts, then, like, I met my husband and started having kids. So anytime I'll get pregnant, it will pop up. Then I'll be on insulin, like hundreds of units of insulin a day. So then after the babies, usually the sugar will come to, Then they will put me on insulin, they will discharge me, I get home, I'll throw the insulin away. So I was in denial for so many years. So they started, like, when I realized after my last baby, and they decided to follow up with care because it was getting worse. My symptoms were getting worse. My vision, my feet, everything was getting out of hand. So I decided, okay, I will follow up. So they started with pills. And the pills, they were making my condition worse.
What was the pill supposed to do first?
Usually, those with type 2, they give them pills. Okay. So they thought that, like, to manage every African has type 2 diabetes. That's what they think, you know, because it's not common, the type 1 is not common among the Africans. So the pills was making me like the condition worse. So it was there that they did the autoantibodies test. That test determines whether you have type 1 or type 2. So my antibodies was like, whew. So the doctor said, oh, so we've been giving you, we've diagnosed you wrongly, like type 2, but you are type 1. So you are insulin dependent. Your pancreas is messed up, it's destroyed. You are not producing insulin at all. So that's when I started taking the shot by myself, manually. But MFA, I wasn't compliant. As a nurse, I prefer taking care of my patients than taking care of myself. So it got that bad, and the doctor said, Lydia, you have only one option left. Either use the insulin pump, or I don't know what. So, and it took me 4 months to accept to use the pump.
How easy or difficult is it to use a pump?
It's very complicated. You can't wear fitted clothing because where are you going to hide this? Yeah, I can hide it in your bra, but it's so uncomfortable, you know. Then I have the continuous glucose monitor that checks my sugar every 5 minutes, and it reads on my pump. So if you hide your pump in your bra, you'll be going to a party, and you have to take it out
and see.
It's very, very uncomfortable.
I'll stay with you if I come to Maxwell. So what, the doctors say that if you get off this insulin pump, I don't want to, what's the worst?
Yeah, with the insulin pump, I get insulin around the clock. And every information on the pump is doctor's orders. I cannot touch them. Yes. So when I'm going to eat, all that I have to do is just put my grams of carbohydrates into the pump, and the order is in there, how many units, how many grams per unit of insulin. Then it will calculate and give me a bolus, like an at-once. Bolus means an at-once dose of insulin to cover the carbohydrate that you're going in front of you.
So what is she saying?
Yeah, so when you have type 1 diabetes, what we do is that we match the insulin level to how much carbohydrate you eat. And 1 unit of insulin is equivalent to 15 gram carbohydrate. Now let me break it down. When we say 15 gram of carbohydrate, it's about 1 slice of bread. Okay, when you have a small size fist of banku, that's about 1/3 of that. Okay, so depending on the amount of unit of insulin, it will tell you how much carbohydrate you should have. But that's very complicated because most patients may not understand. And so we, the dietitians, normally we educate them on what to do. And it's mostly used in the type 1s. Okay. So what it means is that in type 1, you can still decide to eat sugar, but you factor the sugar that you are taking into the amount of unit of insulin you are going to have. But we always don't encourage that because most people end up not doing the injection well. And so it's better you try to avoid sugar entirely.
Right.
Okay, so that's basically what she's trying to talk about. It's very difficult in our setting because the person is not well educated. There's no way the person will understand the insulin to carbohydrate ratio. We call it carbohydrate counting. Yes.
In your years of practice as a dietitian, have you come across this extreme case, such as Lydia's case?
Yeah, I have. Even currently, I have one patient now who we tried all means to bring the sugar down. He's on the highest dose of insulin. But anytime he comes, the sugars are very high. It got to a point, the carbohydrate that we reduced was up to the lower limit. There was nothing you could do. Literally, if you go further, you will be starving this patient. But anytime he comes, the sugars were still high. And so what we decided to do was that we decided to look at the mental aspects because there are also sometimes mental issues that are affecting the care. And then later, when we referred him to a psychologist, we begin to see that the sugars were getting better. Probably he was getting stressed, he was getting burnout, he was probably getting worried about the whole condition. And so that cascade of overthinking affects the breakdown of the glycogen in the body, and that in turn shoots the sugar. So you may eat very little, but your sugar levels will just go up.
He's talked about mental, you know, the impact of it. You have your husband, you have your kids. I know some of the stories, but is this true? Do you think that each time you had an episode, though you're doing everything right, it was because you were overthinking it?
Yeah.
And because I see how you said I was in denial for 10 years. Do you beat yourself up, and
Yeah.
how has it affected your life, your kids, your family life?
I would say it's very, very frustrating because if you are stressed a little bit, it spikes your sugar. If you are angry at something, it spikes your sugar. So like any little thing, your body is compromised. It affects, it spikes your sugar. Even if you are sick and you are not eating. Me, if I get sick, right? If I get cold or if I get dehydrated, whatever, and I'm not eating, my sugar is supposed to drop, but my sugars are going up, like going up off the roof. Although I'm not eating because what? I'm stressed. I'm thinking, oh God, oh why, you know, and all of that. And when my son got diagnosed, it made it worse. So that was that time that I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression.
Okay. So your mom was diagnosed. You were diagnosed. How many kids do you have?
I have 5.
5 of them. And your son, is he the last?
No, he's the middle one.
He's the one in the middle.
Yeah.
Is he the only one that's been diagnosed?
Yes.
Because you're a nurse and you're familiar with the symptoms, how did you know? What did you see?
Because my son is big. He's tall and huge. He loves to eat. So when he goes to school, I'll make him walk. I will never give him a ride. But anytime he walk back home, he'll be crying, Mommy, I have cramps. Because if your blood sugar is high, you have cramps, belly ache. Then he started losing weight massively. So my husband was happy that he was losing weight because he's a big boy, he loves to eat. But the way he was losing weight, MFA, it's like somebody who has done bypass. Like, boom. Like, so it clicked. But at the same time, I didn't want to accept it.
You were afraid.
Yes. So my oldest daughter, at that time she was in nursing school and she lived with us. Then she was like, Mommy, I'm going to say this and you have to. I'm like, what are you going to say? You see, Junior, the way he's peeing a lot, drinking lots of water, whatever. I'm like, don't say it. Don't say it. I've thought about it, but I don't want to believe it. So we decided to take him to see the doctor. MFA, we got to the doctor's office. I told the doctor, and their pediatrician, like all my kids, they have one pediatrician, so they know the family. So they did they checked his urine and guess what? He had lots of sugar in his urine. So they did the random sugar check, and my son's sugar was 450 milligrams per deciliter. That was high. And he had eaten nothing in the morning because he was going to go to school, and I brought them to the doctor's office. So right there, at the seat, I couldn't move. I couldn't move.
By this time, you were also on your...
Yes, I was sitting in the doctor's office, and I couldn't move. So the doctor was like, Lydia, calm down. I'm like, I'm calm. She's like, I'm going to call the ambulance for them to take him to the emergency room. I'm like, no, I'll drive him. That's how I said, no, you're not driving him. And the hospital was just like a stone throw, but they didn't want me to drive there. MFA, they did all the tests. And one thing that I was so grateful was they didn't find any ketones.
What are those?
Okay, so it's a complication that arises from having high blood sugar level. So when the sugar levels are high and it's not getting into the cells, the body tries to look for other alternatives to provide energy. Because you've eaten, but the food didn't get to its destination. And so it burns fat in excess. And that fat that is broken down is used to produce what we call keto bodies. The keto bodies are alternative energy to glucose. So when glucose is not available, the body will make it.
Okay, and is that not a good thing?
It's a good thing, but what it means is that a high level of ketones means that you have high levels of sugar, which is not moving into the cells. And in that case, over a long period of time, that high level of sugar in the blood is going to start affecting your sight, the complications of kidneys and other problems that come with diabetic complications. And so if a diabetic has high ketones, most likely the sugar levels are going to double. Okay, so a high ketone connotes a high sugar level, and that's why it's not good in diabetics.
Yeah, and it can kill you just like that.
Yeah.
Kill you just like that.
Okay. But you didn't have ketones?
No, and my son did not. So that was like, it was a big relief for me.
Okay.
Because the way his sugar was really, really high, that early morning like that, anything could have happened.
How old is he now?
He's 19.
How long has he been living with it?
6 years, yes.
And has he accepted it? Has
He has. He has. And I was telling them in the room that I tried for him to be independent. So when he went to college, I sent him away to Boston, UMass Boston, thinking that, okay, let's see what will happen. I made it worse. I almost lost my son. So I had to transfer him back home. And he's doing way better.
Okay.
Way, way, way better.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about the type 2,
Yeah.
which I like to think is the most common one in this country. What are the symptoms like? How is it diagnosed? What happens when you say a person has got a type 2 diabetes?
All right. So with the type 2, what happens is that your body produces the insulin, all right, but your cells of the body cannot use the insulin. So it's just the passport, you have it, but it's expired, so you can't get entry. So the insulin is there, but the body cannot use it, so the sugar levels in the blood begins to go high. It's the most commonest, even in Ghana and in the world. It's about 90%, okay, whilst the type 1 is about 10%. Mostly common in very obese people. So if you are gaining a lot of weight, you can easily get the type 2. Okay, and mostly we use the metformin and other, pills to treat that. It's not solely on insulin. However, there are some people who have type 2 and their sugar control is so bad that some of the doctors may have to introduce insulin to support the care. But majority of them do well on oral medication, which is the metformin, the sulfonylurea, and the other medications. And so for that one, it's just because you've gained a lot of weight, a lot of fat have blocked the cells and such that the insulin is unable to move the glucose into the cells.
Which means that for the type 2, anybody at all can get it?
Exactly. Everybody, but it's mostly common among people who are obese. From experience, what I realize is that those who have family history of diabetes are 2 times at risk compared to those
type 2 one.
For both. For both. So the mere fact that either of your parents already has diabetes, it means you are 2 times at risk. So we may have the same weight, but because you have a family history, your risk is much higher than mine.
Okay.
Because if I have a family history, then my risk will be higher than yours in that order. Okay. And so for most of the people who have family history, they need to even be more careful. But if you are also gaining too much weight, you can easily get it because the fats in the body can affect the body's ability to use the insulin, and that will result in the type 2. Okay, so those are the things that happen.
Lydia, I've got a question, but I'm not too sure if you can answer this question because you're in the States, and I like to think healthcare is quite, different, very different over there. But what is that one illness or many other illness that we mistake diabetes for?
I think celiac diseases, because they have the same symptoms as type 1. Yeah, and I think poly something, which is common in women.
Okay.
Yes.
Polycystic ovarian
syndrome. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. But doc, the type 2, because of the many symptoms it can shoot at you, at what point do they say that you have this, but we didn't see your diabetes earlier? You have this as a result of a diabetes that was not managed before. What kind of illnesses can arise from diabetes?
Okay, so in our setting, especially in the hinter areas, most of the diagnosis is often late, especially in children. So what you realize that they will be treating malaria, treating other things, when it's actually diabetes. So by the time you get to know that this child actually has diabetes, he's likely to go into complications of renal issues with their heart and all that. And so it's very important that one of the key marker is unintentional weight loss. Because a lot of people want to lose weight. Once they are losing weight, they are happy.
That's me.
But when the weight loss is too drastic and you realize that, you are not really exercising, you are not really eating that much, but you are losing weight, then you need to begin to think about diabetes. Then you realize that you are urinating a lot more often and you begin to sweat. These are things that should strike your mind. And the only way is to go for a test. There is no way you can know you have diabetes unless you do the sugar test. You may have the symptoms all right, but the test will end up confirming it. And in most adults, you see that they will be focusing more on the hypertension.
Yeah.